Welcome to this week's episode of the Savvy Flipper Show. I am your host and business strategist, Clara Rose, and this is Larry Vanderhoof, our resident expert and construction manager.
Good afternoon.
Welcome to the show once again this week. We are going to talk about something that we've never talked about before on the show, and that is flipping condos, which is a new topic, but I think that it's one that if you're interested in real estate, that you need to consider.
Absolutely, absolutely. Especially in states where condos are prevalent, Florida, Texas, some of the Gulf Coast, California.
Lots of great places that have condos.
Yep.
So you could actually flip a condo, a common interest development, if you wanted to.
Sure. But it's a little different beast than resident.
It is. So let's talk about why it's different and why you should care about that. So let's talk about condo flipping. So a condominium, timeshare, things of that nature, they are common interest developments. So they are any real property development where the owners share a common set of financial obligations, property, and easement rights.
Correct.
Right? So you own the condo, but then jointly you own parts of it. So break that down for us so we understand how that split happens.
Okay. So if you are a condo owner and you're watching this, you probably know a significant amount about this, but you are financially responsible for everything inside the studs of your unit, your particular unit.
Studs in.
Yep, studs in. Anything that goes wrong or needs to be replaced or fixed or anything inside that unit is your responsibility. Now, there are other parts of the property, and it depends on the type of structure, whether it's a high-rise, a multi-story building, whether it's townhomes, that type of thing, where you're going to be responsible for parts of the common areas, the areas that you have access to, the pool areas. Maybe there's a workout room, maybe there's laundry rooms, those types of things where everybody shares in the expense of fixing, maintaining, replacing all of those components.
Sure. So that's why it's called a common interest development.
Sure.
Right? You have your own piece that you're totally responsible for, but then there are shared responsibilities for the rest of the pieces.
Right.
So say you're under one solid roof, everybody gets to help pay for the maintenance of or the replacement of that roof. When it's time.
Yep. The roofing, painting, anything. And every state has their own guidelines and whatnot. So wherever you're looking at buying, you'll want to make sure that you are familiar with the requirements when it comes to condominium owning in that particular state, because every state's a little bit different.
So the reason that we care about that as flippers is we're going to be owners of a condominium unless you buy and hold, like if you're going to buy it, renovate it, and then rent it out, or short-term rental it. Either way, you need to know for the length of time you're the owner, there are some things that are important for you to understand, some
Correct.
things that apply to you. That is why we're talking about it here today. If you're just going to buy it and live in it, you need to know these things, but you really need to know these things if you're going to try and flip this property.
Right.
So we're going to talk about those pieces and why they're important to you today. Okay, let's talk about the bylaws that govern these organizations. So the bylaws are just how the community, it spells out how the property is managed, the governing of the operations, everybody's responsibilities, and the rights of property ownership. So these really are important for you to understand, even if you're going to only own it for 90 days.
Yeah.
Right? If you're going to own it for 90 days, you need to understand this. Now, the homeowner should have a copy of these, correct?
The homeowner should, yes. If you're buying this from a current homeowner, they should have a copy of the bylaws with them. Hopefully they've read them. So
maybe
if there's anything that stands out that they feel you should know, hopefully they'll tell you that. But don't take it for granted. You'll want to make sure that you have a copy that you can go through. Bylaws are kind of like reading War and Peace. It's just grueling, but it's absolutely worth the time and effort to make sure that you go through, because sometimes things get buried in there and they'll call out things that may jump up and bite you at a later date.
Right. So it's just important to understand what your rights are, even though, unless you buy and hold, if you're going to flip, you're only an owner for a short amount of time, but everything in those bylaws applies to you during that time.
Yep.
Right? So if it's a quick flip and you're in and out in 30 or 60 days, it still applies to you from the day you sign on the dotted line. It's your responsibility.
Right.
And then if it goes long, right, it turns into a 5 or 6 month stint that you own this before you get to sell it, you're responsible during that entire time.
Right.
Now, what could possibly go wrong in 30, 60, 90 days, 6 months? What could possibly go wrong?
A lot.
Okay, so what kinds of things should we be on the lookout for?
Well, I would highly recommend that, we've talked about inspections and things like that in the past, but I would highly recommend before you ever even consider making an offer on a condo, on a property, is that you take the time to walk that property. You just walk the grounds, walk the common areas, walk the hallways if they have hallways, and just kind of get a sense and a feel of how well this property has been maintained and taken care of. Because what's going to happen, and we'll get into this a little bit deeper here in a minute, but what's going to happen is eventually that carpet in that hallway is going to have to be replaced, or the roof is going to have to be replaced, or maybe it's time that the paint is really bad and it's come time to paint. So if you step in and you buy this property from Mr. and Mrs. Smith, that paint job might be right around the corner. Now it's your responsibility, and it's going to have to be chipped in on your part. So these are the types of things that have to come into your thought process when you're making that offer or considering to make that offer.
Yes.
Hidden things that just don't jump up and.
So you may be able to find these things out on your own, and definitely ask the homeowner if there are any current special assessments. Right? So a special assessment is just when the common interest development has said, oh, look, it's time to do whatever, right? It's time to repaint the exterior.
Yeah.
And if they have not had proper reserves and maintenance, which we're going to talk about in a minute, then they have the right to, and it's spelled out in the bylaws, come to each owner and say, okay, it's time to repaint. Your portion is $5,000.
Right.
Or $10,000,
So,
or whatever it is.
And it's my opinion, from experience, that if you are looking at a potential buy of a condo and they don't have reserves and they do everything off of special assessments, and they're out there, there's a lot of them that do it that way, I would recommend finding someplace else, because those things, those are just brutal. Most of the bylaws give them the right to special assess as often as they feel necessary. 1 month it might be a $150,000 roof that 25 people have to share the cost of, or it might be a $30,000 paint job, or whatever. They can special assess as often as they feel necessary in order to do their fiduciary responsibility and keep the building and the property up to livable standards.
Maintained.
Right.
Now, so some properties do it the right way, and I'm not
Yes.
afraid to say that this is the right way. They will actually have a reserve study done, which is the reason that we know so much about this, is that Larry was a reserve analyst, so he went from property to property telling them, what the useful life of everything was, and how much it was going to cost to replace it, when it was going to need to be replaced, and how much each owner should be setting aside every month for those future capital expenditures. So the reserve study is a document that allows your organization, your common interest development, to every month set aside reserves toward those future capital expenditures. Now, if they've done that and reserves are there, when it's time, there's no need to special assess when it's time to do a new roof, or it's
Right.
time to do a new paint job, or re-blacktop the parking lot, or whatever it is, because preparation has been made for that. People have been saving for it. Ask to see the reserve study If there's been a reserve study done, your homeowner should have access to a copy of the reserve study.
Yeah.
Get a copy from the management, whoever manages it. Super important to just know, has this organization, has this common interest development been special assessing, or have they been doing it the right way?
Yeah, just be right up front.
Yeah.
Say, how are you paying for expenses? How are you paying for a new paint job? How are you paying for repaving the parking lots? Those types of things. Because you're going to want to know that, because as we talked about briefly before, you could step in and say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I'd love to buy your condo. I'm going to give you X for it. And they say, great. They sign it. They walk out. You close on the property. And then 2 days later, you're handed a $10,000 special assessment because they have to repave the parking lot. And, and the dollar values are going to be different depending on the size of the property, obviously. A large condominium complex isn't going to be quite so painful when it comes time to do that type of thing because it's shared between more people. The smaller ones, it's going to be a little bit of a bigger bite. So the last thing you want is that type of a surprise thinking you're going to flip this thing and you're going to make $15,000 or $20,000 on the flip, and then you find out you got a $10,000 special assessment. So you want to make sure you do your due diligence.
Yep.
Make sure that you're buying at a property that does do reserves, and that old adage really plays out. Pay me now or pay me later.
True story.
Is really a true story with condominium.
Yeah. Unfortunately, some states allow you. They'll say you have to have a reserve study unless you don't want to have one. Right. Or you have to have a reserve study and fund it unless you don't want to fund it.
Right.
So unfortunately, that does happen at the state level occasionally. But if you do what Larry said and walk the property and have a look at the condition of things, if it looks like they've done a lot of deferred maintenance, stuff's really looking rough, there's a good chance that they are not funding properly for future capital expenditures.
Right.
And you could very well get hit with a special assessment if they don't have good reserves to take care of things.
Some states will require that a condominium complex have reserves to take care of, like the state of Florida, anything $10,000 or above, they have to be setting aside reserves for that. They don't have to do a reserve study, but they have to have reserves. Now that's kind of a catch-22, because if you don't have a reserve study, how do you know how much to be setting aside for reserves? At that point, it's just a guess. They could be tacking on an extra $75 or $100 or $150 a month onto your lease or your payment to the association every month, when in reality maybe it only needs to be 25 or 30. So reserve studies are very, very important. I don't believe you can have reserves without actually having a reserve study, so that you know exactly how much everybody should be contributing to that reserve.
Right. So something that does happen that we've seen a fair amount of, that you just want to be aware of, is if they're not reserving properly, like they should be, and then they do a special assessment, sometimes people who are in a financial position where they're unable to pay the assessment will walk away or try to quickly sell. So make sure you know if there's a current assessment that there is trying to be collected on, or people who walk away from it and the association is trying to sell it, could be because that person didn't meet that obligation and they walked away instead. So just be aware. As soon as you become an owner of it, it is now your responsibility. Usually special assessments, you get 30 days to pay them. So unless you're prepared to put some money out of your pocket, that could really take a bite out of what you're trying to do. So.
Right. Yeah, and I would advise anybody that's looking into condo owning, condo flipping, whether you're going to keep it and rent it out, or if it's going to be short-term rental, or you're going to live there, whatever the case may be, I highly recommend that you do a little bit of research and studying on reserves, so that you know that the association is doing their fiduciary responsibility. Because if you're reserving for a specific item, be it the roof or painting or blacktop or whatever the case may be, those funds are designed specifically for that particular item. Now there are stipulations sometimes in the bylaws that say that, they can, as long as they replace the money, they can use it for something else, as long as it's a replacement or a repair or something like that. But that money can't be used for anything else but replacing or repairing product or equipment or
Capital expenditures.
Yep.
Right. So it really is about doing your homework and knowing how the organization, the common interest development, stands, not just the unit. And then, of course, it's worth saying that if you are thinking it's going to be a rental or a short-term rental, look at the bylaws, because the bylaws may prohibit that.
Yep, quite often
So
they do.
Quite often they do. So you don't want to jump into something thinking, oh, this is a great place for a short-term rental, and then find out it's not allowed.
Right, right.
So, okay. And then lastly, let's just talk briefly about reserves and maintenance fees. So we've been talking about reserves a little bit. Those are your obligations for future capital expenditures that are determined by the community bylaws and usually based on a reserve study of the property. But maintenance fees are just ongoing monthly fees that you pay as an owner that helps keep the gardener working.
Yep.
And the
grass cut, the weeds pulled, yep,
right,
yep.
regular
The
operations,
pool cleaned, those types of things, right.
So the reason that we bring that up is maintenance fees are going to become your responsibility every month, along with any reserve funds that are supposed to be paid on a monthly basis, automatically become your responsibility as the new owner.
Right.
So if you hold that property for 3 months while you're flipping it, you're going to pay 3 months worth of the reserves and the maintenance fees if reserves are being collected. So lots of stuff to know before you go jumping into flipping a condo.
Absolutely. Yep. And you can learn more about all this on our website. If you have any questions or anything, that'd be a great place to go and get some
Yep, learn
information
some more.
and get some questions
Yep, and
answered and whatnot.
Always happy to take your questions at hello@thesavvyflipper.com.
Yep.
Always happy to take your questions. Okay, so hopefully we haven't terrified you out of buying a townhome or a condo or something to flip it, because you can make good money. It's really about knowledge,
Yeah.
right?
Yep, it is.
And making sure that you're flipping by the numbers,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Your self-inspection, your accurate estimating for renovations, and your effective management of the project are always important. If you're not flipping by the numbers, you're leaving money on the
Yep.
table. Okay, let's talk about the tool of the week. So this week's tool of the week is research. Now, it doesn't sound like a
Ooh,
tool.
yuck.
It doesn't sound like a tool, but I promise you, this is that due diligence that Larry was talking about. Do your research on the property. Do your research you can go on Google and find out some information. One of the tools that you probably are already using for as a flipper might be Propelio or PropStream, one of those tools. If there's been a special assessment on the property that wasn't paid, the HOA may have liened it. You're going to find out that information on one of those tools. Not that they're the only tools out there for that, but public records also. You can do a public records search and find out if there's a lien on a property because someone didn't pay their HOA dues, fees, maintenance.
Or couldn't.
Or couldn't. Yes, sometimes it's merely just a matter of that they couldn't. So they lien their property. Okay, so research is the word of the day. And now we're going to really quickly, because we're almost out of time, talk about the business savvy piece of that. Right? So business savvy for today is due diligence, my friends. Super important for you to do the due diligence and the research before you make an offer on a property. Now, sometimes we get ourselves in a situation as real estate investors where we just want to get the contract signed.
We fall in love with the property.
We fall in love with the property or the potential that we see in our minds.
Right.
And so we get them signing on the dotted line. This is why we have those contingency days, that 10-day, 15-day, 30-day, whatever you're getting, so that you can do your research.
Right.
And at a minimum, you can agree with me or disagree with me on this, but at a minimum, due diligence. If you're still considering investing in a common interest development, condo, townhouse, Anything where there's common components, here's the minimum that I think that you need. Check out their reserve study. If you can get your hands on a copy of it, either through the management company that manages or the homeowner themselves. Sometimes they'll let you get it directly. If they don't have it, get it directly from the HOA. ADA compliance, which we really didn't talk about today, but if you're in a large community and they do allow long-term rental or short-term rental, ADA compliance. Is their pool ADA compliant? Right? Because that's going to be...
Public restrooms.
Are they ADA compliant?
Yeah.
So you can actually have somebody who does ADA compliance reports or studies for you. Often, like Larry did when he did reserve studies, he also offered ADA compliance studies and reports so that a facility would know if they were ADA compliant. Something to just know if you're not flipping and moving on, something important for you to know.
Right, right.
And then, of course, getting your hands on a copy of the community bylaws. Your homeowner should have them. If your homeowner does not have them...
Find out why.
Yeah, well, some people are just not good at that kind of thing, but they can get a copy of them. They can get their hands on them. Yeah. In pretty short order. They should be able to get their hands on them.
Find out the names of the board members, the president of the board, the secretary. Find out the names and meet these people and talk to them and kind of feel them out, see where their minds are as far as the upkeep of the property. Because if you're going to turn around and flip this condominium, you want it to shine. I mean, you want somebody to walk in, and there's some amazing properties here in Florida, but it doesn't matter how amazing they are, if they are not well maintained and taken care of, you're not going to get top dollar for them.
Right. And so that goes back to what you were saying before. Make sure that you walk the property, walk the grounds, have a look, have the homeowner take you on a tour of the property.
Right.
If you're serious about buying their property and they're serious about selling it to you, they'd be more than happy to walk you through the common areas and talk about the amenities that come along with this condominium or townhouse unit.
Yeah, and this is a little bit off a subject, but this whole show is about teaching you how to keep more money in your pocket anytime you're flipping, whether it's residential, condos, whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of things to take into consideration for keeping more money in your pocket. And you need to remember that with a lot of condos, they're high-rise buildings. So getting materials in and out of that building and up to that 8th or 9th or 10th floor or whatever it is, getting debris and whatnot back down out of there. Contractors are going to charge premium dollars for that type of work. So these are all things that you need to kind of keep in mind and kind of put in your memory to consider when you're making an offer on the property.
And that's absolutely all about your accurate estimating for renovations, right?
Yeah.
So the renovation cost for the kitchen on a single family unit somewhere, single family home, is going to be very different than a high-rise condominium where all of that stuff, including the new refrigerator, freezer, the new stove, all those things, all the material comes up the elevator. Yeah. We've actually seen some materials hoisted up the outside of a building.
Or weaved through the stairwell.
Right? Because they couldn't get it in the elevator that gets it up to the high-rise space. So something to really have in mind and talk to your contractor about for estimating accurately. So hopefully we haven't scared you to death, because it can be
it can be extremely profitable. I mean, when you start talking about square foot, dollar per square foot pricing, condominiums can be a very, very good investment. You just make sure you cross all your T's and dot all your I's and have done your due diligence, as we were talking about.
It is about due diligence. Okay, so everything going up to the renovation and everything coming down
from the demolition
and is all going to cost you more money. So be aware as you're crunching your numbers. And then, of course, we have some information on that in Flipping by the Numbers. So if you are going to hop into the Flipping by the Numbers course with us, we invite you to do so. Everything you need to know is in there. You can find that at BeFlippingSavvy.com, and we encourage you to go check it out, see what we're all about, and then hop in and become one of our Savvy Flippers. We'd love to have you as a Savvy Flipper as part of our group, our growing group of savvy investors.
Yeah.
Learn everything you need to know about flipping a condo.
Yep. We've got some exciting guests coming up here in the near future.
We do. Next month, we have somebody flying in from Texas, and she's like the guru of all things flipping. So she doesn't necessarily go deep dive like we do in Flipping by the Numbers on inspecting, estimating, and management of projects, but she can teach you everything that you need to know, from wholesaling to short-term rentals to everything that you need to know. If you are at stage zero, ground zero in your journey as a real estate investor, you will want to meet Teresa, and she'll be here next month to chat with us about all those things. And she has a program as well that can help you become a real estate investor if this is brand new to you. Okay, so good stuff. Anything else you want to share before we're almost out of time? Anything else they need to know about flipping a condo?
No, I think we've scared them sufficiently enough. Yeah, I think hopefully they got something out of it, and they'll be able to
make a good decision. Yep. Okay. And then, of course, we are always open to your questions or suggestions for future shows. We mostly cover inspecting, the DIY inspecting, and then accurate estimating for renovations and effective project management. I can't speak, but we're always open to answering questions. So you can drop us an email at hello@thesavvyflipper.com, and we will get back to you as quickly as possible. And if we answer your question on the show, we will be sure to say hello to you and give you credit. So don't be shy. We are here to serve you. Thank you for spending another Saturday morning with the Savvy Flippers.
Yay.
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 Yes. All right. Don't forget, hop on over to BeFlippingSavvy.com and get signed up for our next masterclass. And we will see you guys next week, same time, same place. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Vanderhoof.
Yep, it'll be fun.
It'll be fun. All righty, we'll see you guys next Saturday. Until then, remember, if you're not flipping by the numbers, you're leaving money on the table.